What's up, guys? So this is my first episode on my YouTube channel that I'm going to be posting. It's just my introduction and kind of who I am, my own story, what I hope to kind of just put onto this channel, put into the world. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach. I've run my own business for about 4 years now. And I thought it was time to start documenting different milestones in my career, helping people out, giving them tips and tricks on their own fitness journey. I specialize in like body transformations, body recomposition, and just losing fat, building muscle, and transforming people's lives. So that's kind of what I'm all about and what I enjoy doing. It's been my passion for the past 10 years. So that's like kind of the preface and the introduction of this YouTube channel, but I'm hoping to see, the quality of my videos improve over time as I get used to long form content and just growing as a coach in general and growing as a person and adopting new lifestyle changes and stuff like that. So I started my fitness journey, like I said, about 10 years ago. I was a skinny mini. I'll put this on the screen here. And I was just so insecure. I didn't have any confidence. I didn't really have much to offer to the world, I don't think. I was the type of person that kind of just played video games, and you can see back there I still have my Xbox, so I still play video games, but I don't play it as much. And I would pretty much waste my life away after school, and even whenever I graduated high school, I wasted my life away. And I would just play video games. At that point, I still was lifting, but I wasn't as serious about it. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I started off my fitness journey. I don't even know how much I weighed. I'm guessing I weighed probably a good 130, 140, maybe. I don't know. I'm 5'9", so I'm a pretty short guy. But yeah, so I started off there. I had no direction. I think I started off with the classic, I want abs, I want to build muscle, everything that your normal teenage guy wanted, And so I started out, I remember asking my cousin, like, how do I put on weight? How do I put on muscle? All of those common questions that a lot of people tend to ask whenever they're starting their fitness journey is, where do I start? How do I actually get to this goal? And so he was like, well, you can either lean bulk or dirty bulk. And I was like, okay, well, I want these results fast. I again, typical like newbie things to be asking and saying, I want the results fast. I want this as quick as possible. I want to change as fast as possible type of mindset. I was acting in a sense of urgency, and I really, really wanted those results, okay? So I decided to dirty bulk. Now, back pace a little bit. Before that, I was doing at-home workouts. I was doing like 100 crunches, 100 sit-ups, like push-ups galore. I had a background in gymnastics, so I did have some upper body strength, inherently just from moving my body around for so many years as a gymnast. But I didn't really put on muscle, at that point. So yeah, I was doing these at-home workouts. I wanted my abs to show. I wanted all of this stuff, and I didn't know what direction. And I came at a crossroads where, I either had to put on weight and sacrifice getting abs for a little bit, or lose a little bit of weight and try to get abs, But what I didn't realize is at that point, I hadn't really developed a core, so the abs that I really wanted probably weren't going to look the same as I had intended because I hadn't built up muscle there beyond, what you already come with. So I chose the path of, dirty bulking and putting on muscle. And through that process, I mean, I would come to school with a big shake, like this big. I'm not even kidding you. And it was like this thick. It was a big shake. And it consisted of, because remember, I didn't care if I put on fat at that point. I wanted to put on muscle. I didn't care. I was trying to put on weight. So I had peanut butter, ice cream, milk, what was it? Oats, protein powder. I think I had Greek yogurt in there. And I think I also put mass gainer in there as well. So this was like a 2,500 calorie like thing that I would walk around with every day. And it makes me want to throw up, like thinking about it still. Like I will not touch a peanut butter chocolate shake ever again. Oh, and I put Nutella in there too. I won't. I like that taste because I did it for about a year and a half straight, trying to put on muscle, trying to put on any sort of weight to get out of the weight that I was in, you know. And at this point, you know, I obviously wasn't doing it efficiently. I wasn't tracking my calories. I wasn't, you know, doing all of that stuff. I wasn't even tracking my weights. I was just going in there lifting, doing all my stuff. And so it came to a point where, you know, years and years of doing that, I did put on muscle, you know, but I also put on excess fat. But at that point, I didn't care. I was so happy with my results that I was actually able to fill out shirts. And speaking of that, one tip that I kind of took on was a little mental thing where I would buy shirts that were smaller than what I actually fit into. So whenever I very first started my journey, I mean, I was super small. So I wore an extra small, okay, slim fit t-shirts. If I could find those, great. And that boosted my confidence. Like whenever I started lifting, because before that, I would just show up in a baggy hoodie and baggy sweatpants. And I was so insecure. I just didn't want anybody to look at my body, whatever. I just went in there, did my thing, whatever. So eventually, after I started putting on muscle, I opted to go for more slim fitting, tight fitting clothes, because remember, I didn't have a lot of excess fat at that point. So I could get away with wearing super tight clothes and people would be like, oh, you're making so much progress in the gym, da, da, da. And that helped me mentally. That helped me so much mentally to kind of get over that hurdle of I'm not making progress. People are noticing that I'm making progress, even if I'm wearing a smaller shirt. You know, I clearly was putting on muscle, you know, and that helped me throughout my journey and helped keep me motivated, knowing that people kind of noticed that I was also putting in the effort, just like I was noticing it. So that was one thing that really, really helped me. And it sounds silly, but that's something that really helped. Now I fit into a large. Like I've put on muscle. I'm trying to get to an extra large. But I fit into a large as a 5'8" male. You know, I weigh 183.5 pounds, I think, as of today. So, I mean, I've put on a lot of weight and a lot of mass over the past like 10 years. But eventually I reached a point, and again, I want to remind you, I was not tracking food. Okay. I was just eating. You know, I kind of came up with a diet plan that allowed me to intuitively eat, where I knew that if I was eating this, the same things every single day, I was going to put on weight. Like I did calculate the calories that I was intaking for the meals that I was choosing. So I knew that if I was hitting those meals and I was eating those consistently, I was going to put on weight, but it wasn't as structured as it could have been. You know, I probably would have had better results in a shorter amount of time had I been, you know, a little bit more structured about it. But I did put on mass. You know, that's the most important thing, is that I was able to do that. It took a lot longer than probably a lot of other people who had a structured plan or had a coach or had something. But I didn't have that. All I was doing was, you know, I was a kid, so I had all this time on my hands. I didn't have two jobs. I had a part-time job as a host at Mad Max. I had so much time on my hands to really research these things. I didn't necessarily need a coach at that point, because I had the internet at my disposal. And a lot of people don't have the internet at their disposal. Well, they do, but they don't have the time to actually do this in-depth research, or they don't want to. They want somebody else to do it, and that's why they hire me. So, like I said, I got to a point where, it had been about 5 or 6 years into my fitness journey. And sorry if you can hear the leaf blower. They're doing stuff around my complex. So it had gotten to about 5 or 6 years. This is now into COVID. And I didn't stop working out. I didn't stop being active. I actually was lucky enough to have some plates and some dumbbells and stuff at home. So I was able to maintain my muscle mass while we kind of transitioned into after COVID life. So, but during that time, I wasn't as active as I used to be. So I put on a little bit more fat. And this is where kind of like those COVID times were. So I'll put that right there. So that's what I looked like. I think it was like during or after COVID. I can't remember. I think they just lifted the mask things. So all of my friends and I went out to we went to go hiking. And there was a waterfall. It was a nice summer day. We all took our shirts off. We all it was boys and girls, whatever. We all were just in our swimwear. And we were taking pictures by the waterfall. And my friend at the time had taken a picture of me. And I looked at it. I asked for the photo a day or two later, I think. And I looked at it. And I didn't like the results that I had gotten, But here's the thing. Even though I didn't like the results, I was self-aware enough to know that just because I didn't like the results that I was getting at that time, it doesn't mean that I gave up on my fitness journey. It means that I pivot, try other things, or stop doing things that I had been doing to change that. That's where a lot of people will stop on their fitness journeys. They will, say, oh, I'm not getting anywhere, I give up. Why are we giving up? I worked so hard. I did have results. I knew I had results, and what I was doing just needed to be brushed up upon. So it was like one of those things where, I just needed to pivot in my fitness career or in my fitness journey. And at that point, I was also thinking about being a dietitian, and we'll get into that in a second. But I knew things had to change. So what did I do? I started implementing progressive overload. I started giving about the lifts that I was having. I didn't give 100% every single time. I gave 100% when I could, and I gave maybe 80 or 90% sometimes, but I made sure to try to bump up my weights. I was no longer doing the same weight every single week. I was trying to push myself in different ways. I was also being a little bit more mindful of my eating. Now, at that point, I still wasn't tracking. Okay, so I want to make that clear. But by making those simple changes, and it wasn't right away, I don't think. I think it took like a year or two, because I don't really drink alcohol anymore. And I think that was a big factor in how my results went from, I'll post one from, I think 2020 or 2021. There's a photo there, and then this is me currently. So in this time frame, I was drinking more here. I was drinking more alcohol. I barely drink. Okay, so alcohol was a big factor in allowing my body to recover and allowed me to get the physique that I have right now. But yeah, so I implemented these things, and I started seeing more progress. And actually I didn't say this yet, but I could wear a shirt and I would look fit. My muscles were showing, my chest was showing through my shirt, stuff like that. I was putting on weight still, and I was still putting on muscle. And so I was going up in clothes sizes as I was progressing through this. But so that leads me to kind of, that wake up call like 5 or 6 years ago now, 5 years ago. Um, that was a wake up call for me to start actually giving a crap about my fitness results and the aesthetics part of it. Um, and I also want to touch on this. I know this is a little bit scattered, but the fact that, I kept going, it shows that I necessarily didn't care that much about the aesthetics. I liked them. They were a good motivator for sure. And to see progress 100% motivated me. But for me personally, I loved the feeling that I got through working out and taking care of myself. It seriously changed my life. Like, I went from somebody who was gaming, inactive, so like depressed. I had so much anxiety. I was not disciplined. I like the list goes on and on and on, of how many negative things were affecting me because I didn't take care of myself. And taking care of myself looked like going to the gym, meal prepping, and actually giving a crap about my life. So I went from that to now running a business. I get to do this full time, I am able to actually look at myself in the mirror and feel good about myself. I feel confident. I feel more disciplined. I have more structure in my life because I decided to pick up some dumbbells and lift them. That's it. And people make that so hard. And I think it's mostly because of the lack of trust and discipline in themselves. But back in 2020, I was thinking about being a dietitian. So I moved to West Virginia for a year, and I was cleaning my room the one day and I was like, I can't sit at a desk all day. It's just not me. I have to be moving around. I get fidgety. I have to move or else I want to explode. So I was like, I still want to stay in the healthcare field or health field, in some aspect, in some capacity. And I was like, why don't I just be a personal trainer? So I went ahead and I originally signed up for ACE. That was not a structured thing, and I wasn't super structured back then, to be able to follow along and read. I hated reading. Okay. So I came across the National Personal Training Institute. I got my certification through there. It took about 6 months. I did that online. And then I started up my own gym. So this was back in 2021 or 2022. Early 2022, I started the gym. So I opened that up by myself with my dad. I literally had nothing. I was a server at that point, full time. I didn't have a savings, okay? I had decent credit, and what I did was I applied for a credit card. And I put the first couple pieces of equipment onto that credit card, and I purchased some paint, I purchased some tape, I purchased whatever I needed to clean up the space that I was, going to be opening my gym in. And I found that space, and that's how it all kind of started. And it's so funny looking back at it, and I'll post a picture of what it looked like. And I originally went with this black, red, and gray design, but it was really depressing, and I think it made the whole space look really depressing. So that's what that looked like. And then a year or two later, I think it was a year and a half later or something, I ended up going and revamping the whole gym. I had built up a client base where I was able to, and I was still a server and running this little business at the same time. I was going back and forth each day, doing everything that I could to make this work because it was my dream and I wanted it to work. So I I saved up some money, and I did get another loan. I did get another loan at that point. That was one of my biggest mistakes, is getting into credit card debt. But I knew that I didn't have, I didn't have all this money. I didn't have my parents to back me up on it. They were there to support me and everything, but they didn't have thousands of dollars to fork over. So I knew that I had to bootstrap this to some credit lines. So that's what I did. And that's what it looked like whenever I was done. So I bought up some equipment and I got everything ready to go and stuff like that. So after that, some really unfortunate, shady stuff happened at that facility, because I was just renting out a space at that point. So the whole thing was not mine, because it was in a building, but some really, really, really shady stuff happened there. And basically the owner got evicted and we all had to leave too. So imagine starting up your business, at 22 years old, you had everything going, running, whatever, 22, 23, I think I was, whenever all that started going down the drain. I literally, that past month, I just bought gym equipment, like more machines for my clients. And so I ended up having to close that down. I sold all of the equipment. I still had the credit card debt, I paid off what I could, but I still had it. And I ended up, I was so stressed out. I was so depressed. I was running on fumes. I was like, I can't let this go. Like, I don't want to let this dream go. This is like one of my biggest things. This is who I am. I'm meant to be an online coach, or a coach at that point. And I was like, okay. So luckily I had made a connection through one of my friends, and she had, referred me over to another gym that was about 5 or 10 minutes away from my gym that I had to shut down. So all of my clients were kind enough and trusting enough to allow me to, move everything over, and they followed me there. So for the next year and a half, I was training out of like another gym. My clients stayed with me and everything. And after that, I decided, I want to help more people. I'm working 12-hour days and I'm burnt out. I want a little bit more flexibility, and I have a dog now and I want to be home for that dog. I don't want him to be in the crate all the time. So I took the jump again. I've constantly taken leaps and bounds and risks throughout my whole career as a coach to make this succeed, and I hired an online mentor, and I gave myself 6 months, and 6 months later, I worked hard enough and I was able to move over to online full time. So I am full-time online right now. And everything has been going really great. I'm able to actually scale this business a lot more. I'm able to help a lot more people. I'm able to actually reach a lot more people than if I were to just be an in-person coach. I'm also able to help a lot more people because I have a lot more time on my hands to do so. So that is kind of where I'm at. That's my story. I'm currently, going back and forth. I took the time yesterday to go back and forth and decide on whether or not I wanted to continue to do a body recomp, because at this point I am just so advanced in my lifts. My body is just advanced in terms of stimuli and everything. So I'm not really going to necessarily build the same amount of muscle that I were to if I was on a bulk, and I'm not going to lose the same amount of fat if I were to be just on a cut, at least as quickly. I could probably lose fat, but it would be a slow process. I kind of want the results right now, if I'm being honest. So I'm going on a bulk right now. So I'm going to go on that for about 4 months. I'm going to be documenting that on here and just giving little tips and tricks and stuff. And then I am going, after those 4 months, I'm going to go on to a cut. Now, this is a little bit different because I really haven't fully tracked on a full bulk and a full cut and fully done all of this stuff. Like I said, I mean, my fitness journey was just like beep, 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 all over the place. So this is kind of my time to build up structure and show you guys what it looks like to actually have a structured routine and to, you know, take the steps and what steps to take to be able to have a successful bulk that's not going to lead to too much excess fat gain. And I'm going to have a successful cut that is going to lead to, you know, me maintaining, or at least trying to maintain, as much muscle as possible on that cut. The reason I'm doing this bulk instead of just going into a cut, because, you know, I've put on muscle over the years. I have muscle, but I have neglected my delts. Okay, I've neglected my traps. I just, over the past 2 years, started focusing more on my back. I want to sharpen up on those spots. You know, I want to develop more of my core, because that is something that I put off for so long. I didn't care about my core. So that is that. That's my little introduction. That is who I am. My name is Coach Gray. I'm an online fitness coach. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.